Well, hello again. Welcome everyone to today's webinar presented by Robert Half Legal, Managing Through Change, Helping Your Workforce Adapt to the New Normal. Again, my name is Carolyn and I'll be hosting today's webcast. Please take a moment to open the chat module by clicking on the chat bubble icon at the bottom of your screen. This will then open a chat area in the lower right corner, and you'll see a drop-down menu with options next to the words "To." If you have any questions today or any technical problems regarding the webcast, you can send a chat directly to me. I would be the host. If you have questions or comments for our presenter, you can chat to all panelists, and we'll make sure that we address those questions at the end of the presentation. And if you have comments or questions that you would like everyone to see, you can chat to all participants. A recording of this webcast will be available tomorrow, and we will send all registrants an email with that link. The sponsor for today's webcast is Robert Half Legal. Today's presenter is Jamie J. Sullivan, the Executive Director of Robert Half Legal, a premier legal staffing and consulting solutions firm. An author and speaker on legal employment and law practice management topics, Jamie began her career with Robert Half Legal in 2002 and has held various management positions within the company. Previously, Mrs. Sullivan worked as a law clerk at an Ohio law firm and for the Ohio State Legislature. She holds a bachelor's degree in communication from the Ohio State University and a Juris Doctor from Capital University Law School, both in Columbus, Ohio. At this time, I will pass the ball down to Jamie, and we will begin today's presentation. Jamie.
Great. Thanks, Carolyn. I appreciate it. Hello, everyone. It's great to be with you. We've had a long-standing partnership with the ALA. I personally have worked with the chapters in Columbus, Ohio, and then Dallas and Fort Worth, Texas over the years. And pre-COVID had the opportunity to travel and meet many of you in person. So great to be here, and I hope everyone is staying safe and healthy, during these challenging times. As we look first here at the agenda, obviously as we're all in unprecedented situations, and as legal administrators and office managers, many of you were thrust suddenly into this brave new world where you and your staff were dispersed, no longer working from the same location. And I'm in the same boat. And along the way today, wanted to share with you some of the strategies and the approaches that myself and my colleagues and I have been using to really succeed in this environment. So today I'm going to take the time to talk about the current hiring trends in the legal field. We'll, of course, talk about challenges that many law firms are facing, but we will also talk about bright spots. We're going to also cover lessons learned from this shift that we've had to do to remote work environment, including how to hire and manage a remote legal team. And then finally, the opportunities for leaders as they transition their legal teams into the new normal. The pandemic has been a game changer for the legal field, needless to say. Law firms have really had to accelerate their digital transformation in response to the pandemic. Client services have really had to become more cloud-centric than previously. Business continuity is a critical imperative for law firms, and they're really relying on the cloud 24/7 for remote access to a full range of information, documents, and resources. As you can imagine, data security and privacy are essential and a critical component of the remote access world that we're now living in. And of course, managing a mix of on-site and remote legal teams is not only something you're probably starting to do now, but might very much remain a permanent practice for us based on the conversations that we've been having with many of our clients. And in this new norm, flexibility and agility are key to business resiliency and to future success. So key focus areas that we wanted to talk through, excuse me, as my slides are getting a little messed up there. We're going to first roll into, before we hit those key focus areas, we want to talk a little bit about what we're seeing from a trends perspective in the in-demand practice areas. While law firms have been forced to reduce headcount, some have had to furlough staff amid the COVID-19 situation. Others have also been able to maintain operations by asking their employees to continue the same projects and servicing their clients on a remote basis. And then other firms, depending on the specialization, are moving forward with the hiring plans that they had pre-pandemic, and some are even ramping up hiring due to increased client demands. In-demand practice areas are changing every day, though, due to COVID-19. For instance, starting off with litigation, that slowed down considerably in the early stages of the pandemic. I mean, as many of us experienced, the courts were closed only for, essential cases. As I'm sure you also have experienced, hearings and depositions were postponed and canceled. But with all of that said, we've begun to see a considerable uptick in litigation, and activity should continue to ramp up as more courts reopen. Litigation experts are being sought to manage a growing number of pandemic-related filings and lawsuits. For example, employment claims, especially business interruption claims. So as we go through, you'll kind of hear us weaving the litigation concept throughout some of these other in-demand practice areas. But moving on to labor and employment, COVID-19 has prompted a surge of employment law inquiries, and that's really been a wide variety of different matters. So we've seen in response to layoffs, family leave, safe working conditions, as well as unemployment compensation. So these legal specialists in labor and employment law will continue to be called upon to manage investigations and disputes that are arising from these issues for the foreseeable future. So the EU data protection law, so GDPR, and then we also have U.S. state-specific regulations, such as the 2020 California Consumer Privacy Act. These have all led to a greater demand for specialists who can help clients and companies navigate the changing landscape around data protection. We continue to see an increase in this activity, specifically with the data security, information law, and we anticipate there's no end in sight for needing these types of specialists to make sure that they can implement data security measures for the vast number of employees who are now working remotely. Moving on to healthcare, which I'm sure you could imagine that would be in the top 10, but we really don't see any end in sight for that, and it's going to be very, very different as time goes on. Right now it's a broad spectrum of matters, everything from labor disputes, medical malpractice, we see drug manufacturing to regulatory compliance, HIPAA privacy, as well as insurance matters. While healthcare issues have been a focal point during COVID-19, the healthcare-based businesses as well as individuals will need to continue to seek counsel on healthcare-related matters going forward. And market for legal talent with healthcare law expertise is expected to grow to manage the increasing caseloads and ongoing updates to healthcare regulations that we expect to see. Rounding out the top 5, wanted to talk a little bit about insurance law, which again, I think many of you could probably see this being in the top 10. But they are, these type of individuals with this insurance law expertise are managing an ever-mounting caseload and this perennial demand. Insurance litigation matters should increase as companies handle very complex insurance matters pertaining to recent business interruptions, as I had previously mentioned, as well as supply chain shortfalls, and of course, contractual obligations related to the pandemic. So moving on into the bottom 5, if you will, at a time we're really seeing federal, we're seeing state, we're seeing local regulations that are changing rapidly. Law firms as well as companies are seeking experienced compliance managers to help them stay current. There will be an ever-evolving compliance strategy for organizations as they resume business, as well as work to establish a hybrid workforce, and both need to keep their employees safe, as well as protect their business and their clients. As businesses determine their go-forward strategy to build resiliency and become profitable, compliance and regulatory initiatives will be at the center of the planning and the execution. So demand should remain strong as companies address this kind of heightened data privacy, both compliance matters, as well as, again, those changing regulations. From an intellectual property standpoint, trademark and patent filings do continue to grow, sustaining demand for those IP experts in the market. The enforcement of patents and other proprietary information is a high priority for many businesses, while tech innovations continue to fuel the need for patent attorneys who can help protect research and development investments. A growing number of these intellectual property matters are in response to current COVID conditions, but we definitely expect additional filings post the COVID environment, and that's probably going to be related to different forms of medical technology as well as cleaning products. We also have seen a demand in the tax law area. So these experts are really helping clients and companies navigate various tax adjustments and implications and complexities spurred on by the pandemic. So for example, there has been changes in tax law as a result of the stimulus packages. There's impact, of course, tax as a result of contract obligations, any debt modifications, of course, capital restructurings, and bankruptcy and foreclosures. So kind of building upon that last piece there, as I'm sure you've seen in the news, many companies have begun to file for Chapter 11, and others are evaluating what is their financial position after they've been through weeks of closure. And we can expect businesses to continue to seek legal advice on strategies on how they can mitigate financial hardships. And this, as you all are aware, could include anything from reorganization, debt restructuring, liquidation, and bankruptcy filings in the months to come. Following months of unemployment, individuals are also experiencing a significant financial challenge and mounting debts. So most likely, they will begin to seek, if they haven't already, legal professionals for counsel on how to manage their personal bankruptcies. And then rounding out the top 10 is family law. There is continual demand for legal services related to matters that deal with family relationships, anything from child support, divorce, legal separation, even adoption. With court closures, there has been a surge in guidance needed from counsel on these related matters. And it is anticipated that there will be a backlog of cases at courts open particularly around child support and child custody modifications. So examples for those proceedings may very well be in part due to the loss of employment due to COVID. So all of these areas that we've discussed, we definitely see will continue to be in demand for career opportunities as well as for firms to leverage in the months ahead. I know I saw some comments on the side. There's definitely other practice areas that we're starting to see a surge in, but these, based on the most immediate research we had been doing, were the top 10. So let's move into managing remote staff. So in a recent Robert Half survey, more than half, 57% to be exact, of office professionals said that they have experienced a shift in their feelings towards the work that they are doing due to the pandemic. Some responses, they were, they're just seeking more meaningful work. And while others said they want to prioritize their personal life. So I want to spend the next time here talking a little bit about how to manage your existing team or teams for that matter, and what are some of those most important elements. So we'll talk through communication, understanding, empathy, structure, while also having some flexibility, resourcefulness, and of course, transparency. So communicating effectively is always key for motivating and keeping your legal team on track. It's exponentially more critical when employees are no longer physically together and can see each other on a day-to-day basis and in one central location. Not only are people dispersed, but they're working in a time where furloughs, reduced hours, and layoffs are affecting millions of Americans. And while your legal team members still have their jobs, they might very well be witnessing their friends and their family members lose their jobs, which can easily lead to feelings of job insecurity. So that's why no amount of communication, either business or human focused, is too much communication. The better you're able to really develop a strong communication link and use them consistently, the better you'll be able to support your people through this stressful time. We recommend you're conducting frequent calls, both in groups as well as one-on-one. This can really ensure that you're sharing the latest company information with your employees as real time as possible. And you really need to interact with your team 2 to 3 times more than you would if you were in the office with everyone. People need to feel, that they know what's going on. Without these meetings and without these regular check-ins, productivity and morale will quickly wane as employees start to feel very isolated. Also, you should include information on what other teams in the firm are doing. It's much harder for employees to keep abreast of important projects they're not directly involved with when they're not always in those larger group meetings. And they can't just walk down the hall, right, and check in with a colleague or drop in the office. So again, keeping that type of communication as to what's going on in the firm is important. I can't emphasize this next one enough, but really making sure you keep the calls on the schedule, meaning make sure it doesn't fall off the calendar. It provides a much needed feeling of certainty for your staff if they know that there is a consistent, ongoing communication for both formal as well as casual, and that you're committed to not letting it drop off the calendar. Using a calendaring system, of course, that you can see each other's availability would really be helpful. And then something new that I hope that many of you have started to discover, but we're probably calling it more and more a virtual coffee talk. It's really the new way of the world. Using platforms such as MS Teams, Zoom calls, there's other online meeting tools, but when you're using those, remember to be ready and be camera ready for your internal employees, just as much as you would for an external business meeting. Some other aspects, like when you are in those meetings, maybe your camera is off while you're doing the meeting, but when you're ready to ask a question or talk, turning the camera on. Great feature that MS Teams has, if any of you have been using that, is it even has a raise your hand feature. And those types of interaction, using your camera, using that feature really helps to encourage interaction when you're communicating in these meetings. Encourage the regular communication also among individuals. So not just the team members, but making sure that they have that frequent touch point with their colleagues outside of those meetings. And also, remember to check in to see how employees are actually doing and demonstrate your support for their overall well-being and not just their work. We recognize, technology is a helper and it's a tool, but it's definitely not a cure-all. So it's really up to leaders of every business to almost serve as the glue that holds their team together during these stressful times. And it's more essential than ever, as much as a workforce is dispersed, that you almost, I would say, try to be a guiding light to your team. So maybe I can elaborate a little bit more on that. When you're managing remotely, it will be difficult, right, to notice if your employees have concerns, if they're worried, if they're frustrated. I'm sure many of you have already experienced that, as we've been, many of us, in shelter in place for quite some time. Well, this is important that your tone and your messaging is very clear, and ultimately that you are being open and authentic as much as possible. It will really go a long way toward easing anxiety with your teams, as does being upbeat and positive as much as you can. Your employees will really follow your lead. They will demonstrate kind of that can-do attitude. It will become infectious if you're able to do that, and they will take that on as well. Honesty and transparency are vital, especially with potentially unpleasant developments. So think about, as a legal administrator, you may not be able to share everything with your team, but giving them as much as possible fosters trust and really will mitigate the impact that bad news will have on the morale of your team. Another point, I can't emphasize this one enough as well, leading with that empathy. We realize everybody has a different personal situation at home. We know that we're fortunate. We all feel fortunate to have our jobs during this crisis. We're providing for our family, but having a job also gives them this outlet for interacting, although virtually, with people every day. So this brings some sort of sense of normalcy to a very stressful time. But remember, ultimately life comes before work. As a leader, your role in holding the group together extends to that employee's personal and their human needs. We're all challenged during this time to ward off low spirits, especially with isolation can do. And though, everybody faces different challenges and reacts to them differently, you can truly help support them. I do know, though, with all of that said, work does need to get done. So here are some ideas we thought we would share on how you can accomplish that. Reprioritizing projects, or even restating and reinforcing current priorities. This can give your team a shared sense of purpose, and it can really help them move more smoothly and confidently through the weeks that are coming, as well as possibly months. With so many employees working remotely, it's also essential that you very clearly communicate and designate who are the project managers on every task and every initiative. So even when we're co-located and working together, it's very easy for teams and subgroups to run off and do their own thing and in different directions. But now more than ever, this is no time for the right hand not to know what the left hand is doing. I would recommend, putting only one person in charge of each initiative, but, making sure that at every attempt, you're ensuring that no part of that particular project can proceed without input from the project manager. So now let's talk a little bit about hiring. It may seem odd to talk about hiring when there are millions of workers filing for unemployment. I understand that. But the reality is that there are some firms that are maintaining their hiring plans that they had before the coronavirus outbreak. And some are even experiencing growth and are adding additional new headcount and new employees. Hiring must continue for these businesses. So hiring managers must rise to the challenge, if you will, of an all-remote recruiting process until they can return to the office. So when you do need to hire, I definitely say posting your job on job boards is definitely a great start. Nothing wrong with that. But I would recommend you look at building out an additional plan and tap multiple resources for an even better chance of finding the people that you need most for your current openings. So some other things that you could do is contact former employees that were great performers on your team. Those are capable of working successfully off-site specifically. And some of those people may be retired and others may be employed elsewhere right now, but they might entertain a competitive offer to return to your law firm. I would also ask your current employees if they know anyone who would be a good addition to the team, instituting a referral program, if you will. Whatever type of work you need, whether that's a temporary, a full-time person, or kind of a project initiative-based person, a specialized staffing firm can help move the process along quickly. Working with the staffing firm can also be an effective and strategic approach, especially amid market uncertainties. These staffing professionals are already well-versed in hiring remotely and can help you really navigate this process, as it might be very new to you to be able to hire somebody remotely. They also have a pool of candidates that include remote interim staff who are highly skilled and specialized, and they're also will know if they are available currently to work from home right away. So when you're conducting remote interviews, I would definitely want to give you guys some advice to not wing it. I'm sure there's many of you on the call that have already had to do remote interviews, but want to walk through a couple of things here. Really figuring out the details ahead of time, who's placing the call, what online platform you're using, et cetera. Making sure you're giving the interviewee the names and the titles of the other people who will be joining the interview. Really prepare the technology in advance to avoid glitches. If possible, conduct a trial run of your video conferencing platform a day or so beforehand, giving yourself enough time to adapt if something does go wrong, and also as much as possible ensuring that you have the bandwidth and a good connection. In the case, that the video link might not work, making sure that you have the candidate's email and phone number available so you can connect via phone right away. Now, during the interview, this probably speaks for itself, but I think conducting these on a regular basis, day in and day out, and even doing virtual meetings is new for many people. So when you're doing the camera perspective, look at the camera when you're speaking and not at the candidate's image on the screen. Speak clearly and calmly, of course, and then really avoid any distracting movements during the conversation, particularly using your hands or having a pen in your hand and waving it around is an example of that. Also, at the end of each comment, make sure you're pausing, and this will really minimize each other talking over one another, especially, again, if you and the interviewee is not used to doing a virtual interview. So in addition to discussing, of course, the position itself of the applicant and assessing, their overall experience during the interview, you're going to want to ask questions that will help you determine if they would or could be a successful off-site worker. Some of those things that we look for in that person you end up hiring is, are they reasonably tech savvy? Could they very easily demonstrate taking initiative on projects and leading? Are they a good problem solver? And then, of course, they need to be excellent communicators, as we mentioned previously, how important that is. Evaluating a candidate's fit with your law firm's company culture is never easy in a short time span. In a video interview, you can at least get an overall sense of that person's behavior and their work style. I'd like to, just run through a few example questions that you could ask that can hopefully pull that information out. I always like to hear, our firm's core mission is X. Mr. Candidate, what does that mean to you? And then finding out what drives that individual to succeed as a professional and how do they challenge themselves to keep learning new things. Asking them what management style do they thrive under. I would also make sure to ask them to specifically detail for you some of the best projects that they've been a part of, why did the project work, and what role did they actually play. Another favorite is, what kind of team member are they? Like, how do they work within a team, and what does teamwork mean to them? In this remote world that we're in, teamwork is more and more important, so it's another very strategic interview question to ask. I would also recommend, how well do you adapt to change, kind of pausing there, and then you can even elaborate on that. How do you adapt to change in project priorities? So it's almost like a twofold, because again, we know we'll be reprioritizing projects in this current landscape. And then lastly, another one I like to mention is asking the interviewee, what 3 qualities do you think make you a good fit for this job, as well as for our overall law firm? So hopefully that gives you a couple of different ones that you can work in and ask as well. So whether your new remote hire is temporary or full-time, you want to make sure that you're bringing them into the fold. Otherwise, you really risk, making them feel isolated from the team. They won't understand who they contact when there's problems that arise, or worse yet, they may very well go off in a different direction with projects that you assign to them. So I'd like to share some best practices for onboarding remote workers. Number 1, set them up properly. Really getting all of those technical aspects, such as email, their internet access, and other credentials that they might need. Make sure you're taking care of that before the new member's first day on the job. If they're going to be using company equipment, or are they local? Make arrangements for delivery or curbside pickup of any of that equipment. And if they're using their own equipment, make sure you send them info on how to access your systems and your systems and your servers securely. So I would really recommend that you are working closely with your tech department and kind of have a critical checklist, if you will, to ensure that your individual is set up appropriately. Number 2, give them a hearty virtual welcome. So recommending that you set up a video conference to introduce that new staff member to current employees. And you could have them go around and say something about themselves, briefly describing what their role is, what practice group they support within the law firm. You can even have them touch on work-related or even non-work-related topics to kind of build that knowledge of who they are, and then vice versa for the new employee as well. Thirdly, pair them with a work buddy. This is something that we've done for quite some time, and I think it works really well whether you're remote or you're on-site, but really now, especially when you're off-site and you don't want your new employee to feel isolated, it's really important to help them navigate who are the names in the organization and in the org chart. Who do I go to for tech support? So consider partnering each new hire with a current staff member who can help them through their first weeks on the job. The arrangement should be mentorship-like, and this should also be in addition to the company's formal on-the-job training or now off-site training that you have in place. Fourth, create an online manual. So this buddy, right, our work buddy, may not be able to answer all questions. So now is a really excellent time to put together a company technology and a resource guide that is available digitally. It should include instructions for company systems, of course, team members, their names, their role, their title, their contact info, as well as current project schedules, and then links to important files and so on. And then lastly, this might be really obvious, but just making yourself available to your new team members. This is all part of the new world that we need to get used to. For the time being, it's no or very limited office gatherings, and with no in-person meetings, it's greater difficulty to cultivate that camaraderie that makes working for a great firm a very rewarding experience. Hiring takes on a very different look for businesses bringing people into new positions that are remote from day one. So it takes detailed planning and consideration. When we finally exit this crisis, the world may see lasting changes in some ways, and we will have to continue to adapt. Even so, the skills that you've learned while you've been managing a remote workforce will not go to waste. They'll allow you to achieve greater flexibility and dexterity as you continue to manage your teams in the future. Now to really kind of the last portion that we wanted to talk through in our topic today. With states beginning to ease some of the lockdown restrictions put in place to help curb COVID, many legal managers are thinking about how can we reopen our law firm offices, transition employees back to working on site, and ensure that it's safe. Some have already begun this process, and many know by now that as stay-at-home ordinances are lifted in your state or your city, work will be far from business as usual. Immediately returning to all of our old ways is neither sensible nor practical currently. Let me say from the onset, I won't suggest any timelines for returning to the office. The timing, the scope, the process of returning to the workforce is going to vary from firm to firm as well as location to location. As our research has indicated, there are still definite concerns about returning to the office. 56% of professionals worry about being in close proximity to colleagues. Yet at the same time, 55% believe it will be more difficult to build strong relationships with their colleagues if their teams are working remotely and aren't in the same building as much. Legal managers should consult with their counsel regarding compliance with applicable local, state, and federal guidelines, as well as you even have to take into consideration the very building that your office is in and what are their rules and their regulations. Every business and every individual should return at a time that they deem appropriate and that is safe. Our research also shows that workers kind of have started to visualize what some of those changes are going to be as offices reopen. 72% are rethinking shaking hands. I mean, we do this every day amongst our colleagues, amongst our business contacts. Given that social distancing, is being required, handshakes and other greetings that involve contact are no longer the new norm, right? It's not the norm. And you should determine new ways within each of your offices on how those greetings will happen with each other. Other research findings, 59% are rethinking attending in-person business-related events, and 69% plan to use email or phone meetings rather than in person. Of course, virtual meetings are already included in that. There are also 57% are weighing the necessity of business travel. So that's a big one, too, to take into consideration. And these aren't it, right? These are just some of the more leading changes that have been visualized in the surveys that we have been conducting. So as we say, the new norms, right? That's kind of our new concept that we keep talking about. This here is some research or survey results from what employees want their companies to take as a result or to do as a result of COVID-19. So right here at the top, this actually was a tie at 79%. So allowing employees to work from home more frequently was one concept, and then also having better cleaning protocols. So again, those were both at the top. Then followed by, again, expectations by employees was 70% expect that their employer will hold fewer in-person meetings and trainings, so again, virtual and phone. 55% would, think that a measure that we would be taking as employers was staggering employees' work schedules. So thinking, a hybrid schedule, like some remote, some in office, or 3 days in the office, 2 days at home, or some of those examples of staggering schedules. 52% are expecting that they'll be required to wear a mask because that will be enforced. And this is typically, what we've seen or heard is outside of the personal office, if you had a door that you could close, or even if you have high cubicles. But if you're walking around the office, specifically would be asked to wear the mask. And then 46% expect a measure that employers would take would be to change the office layout. So, we know that in some industries, such as like retail and hospitality, employees can't work from home. And really depending on the nature of their roles, the staff at your law firm may not be able to do so as well. But the legal professionals who have been working successfully from home may wish to continue doing so. Continued remote work is advantageous for both employers as well as employees alike. For employers, you may see lower costs for real estate, reducing the size of your office space and your overall real estate footprint. Also, operations such as water and electricity could go down, fixed assets, examples like office furniture, as well as decreasing expenses with office supplies and commuter subsidies. Likewise, workers can benefit. And our recent survey shows that remote work is being well received by most employees. So 74% said they'd like to work remotely more following the pandemic. 63% say they've realized that their job is doable from home, that they've been able to accomplish it successfully. 60% also feel that now by working from home, they have a better work-life balance, that it's really improved, and it's also partially due to the lack of a commute. And then really rounding out the top is 43% feel more comfortable with technology. Obviously being thrown into this remote work environment, many of them that maybe weren't as tech savvy previously have had to learn, and 43% again feel much more comfortable than what they did pre-pandemic. You'll need to apply the skills that you've leaned on during stay-at-home orders to keep all of your members together as you look at reentry. Interpersonal abilities are more important than ever, but your employees also will need to develop new soft skills as business conditions continue to change. The good news is that team members who have been working remotely have really been perfecting many of these skills already since the restrictions began. But they'll still need them when they return to the office. So really some of those qualities that you would want to look for in your team and continue to hope to expand upon with your team would be one of those that we've already mentioned multiple times, but that flexibility and the adaptability to the ever-changing situation. We're also hoping that they're going to have a willingness to pitch in wherever their skills are needed to help move the business forward, and not only resuming business, but business resiliency, building upon that. We want them to have comfort with tackling multiple roles that they're going to be asked to do, and really hopeful that they're going to be able to showcase their creativity to solve shifting challenges that we know that we will continue to encounter in the foreseeable months to come, as well as an eagerness to continue to learn new technologies. I know I mentioned the digital transformation at the very beginning of our webinar here, and so we need employees to have those skills, that desire, that want to continue to learn as they also go back on site. So let's change direction here just for a little bit and talk a little bit more about keeping your law firm in business. Agility and flexibility have always been important to law firm teams, but when conditions change abruptly and dramatically, like what's been happening in our current landscape, they're absolutely essential to survival. Returning to the office does not diminish the need for agility. It's key to success even back in the office. In fact, you're going to need to retain clients, and that may require continual readjustment. Their very needs most likely have shifted as well due to the pandemic. You may need to keep reprioritizing tasks. We had mentioned reprioritizing projects and realigning your resources. That way it will allow you to serve your clients in the best way possible to continue that business resiliency. You've also have to be very good at managing a mix of resources as you're re-entering into the office. Even in today's business environment, we know retention efforts will be tested. So here are 4 tips that I wanted to share on keeping your team motivated to stay with your firm in the long term. So the first one here is probably not a surprise, but pay your top performers well. Even in times of relatively high unemployment, if you aren't meeting what other law firms are paying for similar work, you risk losing your most valued team members. Next, as it relates to retention, is focus on an employee's well-being. While in-house gyms and those quiet rooms may not be possible for a while, you'll still want to help people get through this time emotionally. So consider wellness webinars for your team. Some of those topics would be how to cope with uncertainty, living through change, stress management, there's financial management, as well as mind-body relaxation webinars. Again, be flexible. We've mentioned that quite a few times. Allow a wide degree of latitude in working hours and deadlines so people can arrange their lives, because you got to think about this. We don't have the same direction that we had gone previously pre-pandemic. And as it continues to erect barriers for us, even our everyday tasks that we normally took for granted or services that were available. So again, having that latitude in working hours will really go a long way. And then of course, lastly, ask for feedback. So, can't just put it out, but, allowing for some sort of flow back from your employees to glean really how they're feeling about your retention programs, such as an online survey. This can go a long way in really evaluating the effectiveness, again, of your retention programs. So with that, Carolyn, I know that we were going to take a few minutes to see if we had any questions from the audience out there. So I'll maybe turn that over to you for a second.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Jamie. That's a wonderful presentation. And again, yeah, if anyone does have questions, you can chat right now in the chat box, and we can get those to Jamie. But one question so far from Lisa, how can I stay connected with my team and better gauge how they are feeling about project demands when I'm working remotely?
Yeah, appreciate that, Lisa. It can definitely be challenging to stay connected and really assess your employees' feelings when you can't, always interact with them. But as much as you possibly can, interact by phone or by video each week, regular and consistently as possible. But it's important that you're also asking the right questions. So some of those might be, just tell me, how are you feeling? What's your workload? How is that impacting you? What challenges are you currently facing this week? And then also, what successes have you had? Like making sure you're being positive and bringing that to light. Always asking, what support do you need from me is extremely important and can go a long way when you're working remotely and supporting your team. And also asking, how can we improve team collaboration and communication, making that a two-way street to make sure that you hear back from them.
Okay, great. And also a question from Dan. He says that he took on a new management position right before the pandemic and has had to adjust to being a new manager and also to supervising a new team that is 100% remote in multiple cities and different time zones. How do I know if everyone on my team is working effectively and being productive without being a micromanager?
Yes, that's a good one, Dan, and definitely spot on to be awareness, right, to work through that. New teams and new managers really have to build trust with each other. So rather than micromanaging, by having check-ins daily or meetings to see where they're at, that can really stress the team out, right? So that can result, if anything, in a decline in productivity. So, making sure you're being upfront and setting clear expectations, said differently, being transparent about what you personally are working on, what are the key deliverables, responsibilities, the deadlines that you're looking for, and not only for the team, but also that's for yourself, right? Being a new manager. This will help you develop good practices. It'll help your team communicate and stay connected. I would also recommend tech tools, whatever your firm has, or if there's potential to invest if they don't have a platform. An example is just like MS Teams. It offers ways to share calendars, documents, to whiteboard in meetings and provide updates. And it's actually a no-brainer tool, in my opinion, on really being supportive to continue to help a team collaborate.
Okay, Kelly asks, employees who work in the office often believe that those working remotely are not working as hard. Any ideas on how to balance this out?
That's good, Kelly. Yeah. I think it still goes back to, are you including them in those team meetings, virtually, and having them be participative, meaning the individuals working from home and almost giving a status update of where they are and what they're doing. And it may very well allow for them to take the lead. We talked about that, making sure you have very set project managers that are going to be leading that project or a part of the project or the initiative. And that could be a nice balance to do both on-site employees as well as remote employees, so that the work product that you're looking for is spread out evenly amongst remote and on-site, and responsibility is spread out, and the deadlines are also kept the same. And then again, bringing them all together to report out, to work together, to collaborate together would be, one of my recommendations on how you could potentially curb that thought that the off-site employees are not working as hard as the on-site.
Okay, Beth asks, do you recommend or know if anyone uses a productivity software?
Beth, I'd have to do a little bit more digging in on that. In the clients that I've most recently have been speaking to from a law firm perspective, I haven't seen a productivity tool, but I can definitely, have some more research on that and see if we can get back to you on any, but that's just not one that I personally have come up with. I think, again, you have to be very careful that whatever productivity tool you do look at, that it doesn't lean towards appearing as micromanaging.
Okay, and one other question. What is a good website or webinars to share with my employees for mental health and coping with the situation that they're living in?
Yeah, there's quite a few free resources out there. We can definitely follow up with them. I know many firms have also partnered with other organizations to put together wellness webinars for them. So I wouldn't want to just name off one in the case I'm leaving somebody out, but there's also been some free things such as like, Peloton even did a free subscription for a while. The app Calm even did some free things for a while. So thinking about health and wellness and meditation. So there's quite a different wide variety out there that you can easily Google and get some access to. I was trying to think of another one. We've worked with Gallagher and Garnet, and so, there's so many out there, but those might be a little more cost prohibitive, but we've definitely seen some free resources out there.
Great. That's it for the questions on my end. Jamie.
Excellent. Well, I really appreciate everybody's time today. If there's any questions that we missed, we'd be happy to, follow up with anybody. But I know that we're all living in a difficult time. We're all experiencing something a little different depending on where you are across the country. As legal administrators and law firm leaders, it can be hard to manage and grow your team. If you need any sort of further advice, let Robert Half Legal be a resource for you. We can connect you with somebody locally for you to talk to. We also invite you to visit our website as well as our blog for more advice and resources. And for more insight, I believe that Carolyn was going to put in the chat that you can download our report of 10 lessons for managing your staff in COVID-19. And I do believe we'll also share that in the follow-up that she sends out of the presentation. So again, thank you so much for the time and the partnership. I ask that you all be well, stay safe, stay healthy, and stay connected as much as possible during these difficult times. But thanks for having me.
Thank you, Jamie. Wonderful information, and thank you for everyone who logged on and was engaged. There will be a recording sent out tomorrow for everyone who registered, and you will also get access to the slides as well as the 10 lessons for managing your staff during COVID that Jamie referenced. It's also currently in the chat module right now for you to download. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day, and we hope to see you again for future webinars. Take care.